I've been a police officer for over 15 years, and in that time, I've responded to everything you can think of. Armed robberies, drug busts gone wrong, homicides, and of course, countless domestic disturbances. But there's one call I'll never forget. I've never been able to explain it, and I don't think I ever will. It was late, maybe close to midnight. Dispatch reported a 911 call from a suburban house just outside town. The caller was a woman, but she didn't say much. Just, "Please send someone," before the line cut out. Standard procedure was to treat it like a possible domestic situation. I was alone that night, so I responded. When I pulled up to the house, the first thing I noticed was how quiet the street was. Normally with these calls, you'll hear raised voices, yelling, sometimes things breaking. But here, nothing. The house itself was dark except for one light on upstairs. The neighborhood was well kept, manicured lawns, the kind of place where people know their neighbors and gossip travels fast. It struck me as strange that nobody else had called about noise, if it really was a domestic. I walked up the driveway, radioed dispatch to confirm I was on scene, and knocked on the front door. No answer. I knocked louder, announced myself. Still nothing. That's when I noticed the door was slightly ajar. Now this is where training and instinct kick in. A cracked door usually means one of two things. Someone inside is hurt, or someone inside doesn't want you coming in. Either way, you don't hesitate. I drew my flashlight and pushed the door open. The house was spotless. Living room tidy, TV off, no signs of a struggle. It almost looked staged, like a model home. Still, I announced myself again, moving carefully through. That's when I heard something upstairs. Not footsteps exactly, more like a low shuffle. I took the stairs slowly, one hand on my gun, the other holding the flashlight. At the top was a hallway with 3 doors. The first 2, bathroom and guest room, were empty. The last door at the end was half open, light spilling out. I nudged it with my foot and swung the beam inside. It was the master bedroom, and sitting on the edge of the bed were a man and a woman, both in their late 30s maybe. They were side by side, facing forward, hands in their laps. But they weren't talking. They weren't moving. I lowered my weapon slightly and identified myself. No response. They just sat there, staring blankly ahead, their eyes glazed, like they weren't even registering me. I tried again. Nothing. Finally, I stepped closer, keeping some distance just in case. "Ma'am, sir, are you the ones who called?" Their heads turned in unison toward me. Slow, mechanical. And both of them opened their mouths to speak, but nothing came out. Not a whisper, not a breath. Just silence. I swear the hairs on my neck stood up. I've dealt with intoxicated people, drugged people, people in shock, but this was different. They weren't trembling, they weren't panicked, they were vacant, like puppets waiting for a string to be pulled. I told them to stay put while I cleared the rest of the house. Procedure, you know. You don't assume a scene is safe until you're sure. So I moved through every room, every closet, basement, even the backyard. Nothing. No forced entry, no signs of anyone else around. When I came back upstairs, they were still sitting there the exact same way. At this point, I radioed for medical assistance because something was seriously wrong. I didn't know if it was neurological, drug-induced, or what. But I wasn't about to leave them like that. Within 10 minutes, backup arrived, along with EMTs. Strangely enough, when they came into the room, the couple seemed normal. Disoriented, sure, but able to stand, walk, even mutter a few confused words. The EMTs checked them out, but they couldn't get a clear answer as to what happened. No injuries, vitals okay, no obvious drug use. The couple just kept saying they didn't remember calling 911. The call ended with them being transported to the hospital for further evaluation. On paper, it was just another suspicious circumstance. I wrote the report, clocked out, and went home. But the story doesn't end there. 2 days later, my sergeant asked me into his office. said they needed to review my body cam footage from that night for training purposes. No big deal. We sat down and watched it together. Everything looked routine, the entry, the search, me finding the couple, exactly how I remembered it. But then, something caught my eye. In the footage, right as I entered the master bedroom, there's a figure behind me. Tall, shadowy, no clear features, just there. It stood in the corner of the room, head tilted slightly, almost curious. And here's the worst part. While I was checking the room, talking to the couple, moving my flashlight, that figure never moved, never made a sound, but it stayed behind me the entire time. My sergeant paused the footage and looked at me. I remember the expression on his face. He was trying to play it off like it was a glitch, but I could see it unsettled him too. When I asked to review it again later, the file had been corrupted, unviewable. Officially, the call was closed, but unofficially, I know what I saw, or rather what the camera saw. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving the patrol car down some empty stretch of road, I get the sense I'm not alone, like something's in the back seat, head tilted, silently watching. I've been a patrol officer for a little over a decade, and in that time, I've responded to more than my fair share of strange calls. Most of them have reasonable explanations. Domestics, noise complaints, drunks wandering into the wrong yard. But every now and then, you come across something that doesn't fit into a neat little box. This is one of those times. It was just after 2 a.m. when dispatch sent me to check out a local park. The caller was anonymous, just said they'd seen strange lights moving around the playground area, almost like fireworks or flashlights, but no sounds. Normally, parks are empty at that hour. City ordinance actually makes it illegal to be there past midnight, so my first assumption was that it was a bunch of teenagers screwing around. When I pulled up to the park, though, I could tell right away something felt off. The park sits at the edge of a neighborhood with one of those classic playground layouts. Swings, slides, a jungle gym, and one of those old metal merry-go-rounds that kids aren't supposed to play on anymore. During the day, it's always packed with families, but at night it was different. The parking lot was empty, no bikes chained up, no signs of anyone. But it was too quiet. You spend enough time outside at night, you start to notice the baseline noise, the hum of traffic in the distance, insects chirping, wind through the trees. But here, it was like the sound had been sucked out of the air. Dead silence, except for the faint crunch of gravel under my boots. I radioed in that I was on scene and began a slow walk through the park. My flashlight cut across the playground, scanning the equipment. The swings hung still, chains glinting under the beam. The slide gleamed with dew. Nothing seemed out of place. I walked the perimeter first, making sure nobody was hiding out in the trees. Still nothing. But then, as I cut back toward the swings, I noticed movement. One of the swings was swaying, just slightly, back and forth. Now, it had been a still night, no wind at all. My first thought was that maybe someone had just been there and ran off when they saw my headlights. I moved closer, shining the flashlight across the ground for footprints, but the wood chips under the swings were undisturbed. That's when I heard it. Faint, distant, the sound of children laughing. It was so soft at first I thought I imagined it, but it was there, unmistakable. High-pitched giggles, the kind you hear at recess. But the park was empty. I called out, "Police! If anyone's out here, you need to come out now!" Silence again. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting on my sidearm, scanning the shadows. The swing was still moving, just a little more than before. I decided to do a full walkthrough of the playground itself. My body cam was running as it always does. I stepped onto the wood chips, boots crunching, and moved past the swings toward the jungle gym. My flashlight cut over the slide, the climbing bars, the merry-go-round, all empty. But the feeling of being watched was strong, like eyes on me from every angle. Then the laughter came again, this time clearer, multiple voices. Children, but warped, like a recording being played through broken speakers. I froze, shining the flashlight around wildly. The sound stopped the instant the beam moved. At this point, the hair on my arms was standing straight up. I've been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. This wasn't adrenaline. This was dread, pure and simple. I backed up slowly, intending to clear the park and call it in. As I turned toward the swings again, both of them were moving now. Not wildly, but steady, rhythmic, like two kids swinging in perfect unison. I raised my flashlight, but at that exact second, my Bodycam glitched. It happens sometimes. Static, distortion, usually lasts less than a second. But this time, in that split-second freeze, the camera caught something. Through the crackle of static and blur, I saw the playground full, children everywhere, a dozen of them at least, on the swings, the jungle gym, the slide, running, climbing, spinning the merry-go-round. Their bodies moved like normal kids playing, but their eyes were nothing but black voids, hollow. When the camera feed cleared, they were gone. The playground was empty again. I stood there in absolute shock, my hand trembling on the flashlight. The swings had stopped moving completely. Everything was still. I forced myself to finish the check, every inch of the park, every bench, every corner of the field. Nothing. No people, no cars, no signs of anyone ever being there. Finally, I got back to my cruiser. My throat was dry, palms slick with sweat. I radioed dispatch, said the park was clear, and cleared myself from the call. But here's the thing. When I reviewed my Bodycam footage later, the glitch was still there, clear as day. For less than a second, you can see them, the children, dozens of them. Their faces pale, their mouths open in silent laughter, their eyes black pits. I showed it to a fellow officer. He told me it must have been a technical glitch, an overlay of corrupted frames. But I could see the look in his eyes. He knew it wasn't just static. That was 3 years ago. I still patrol the same areas, still drive past that park almost every night. During the day, it's full of life, families, kids running around. But when I pass it at night, I don't look too long. Because sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I swear I see the swings moving, and I hear faint laughter on the wind. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe our channel, and leave a comment with where you are from and what time you are watching our video. That'll help YouTube to show you more stories like this one. I've worked as a patrol officer long enough to see some awful things, the kind of images that stick in your head long after the reports are filed. But there's one call that changed the way I look at evidence, at reality itself. It was about 3 years ago. Dispatch sent me and my partner to a possible homicide in a residential neighborhood on the west side of town. The caller was a neighbor, said she saw blood seeping out from under the door of the house across the street. By the time we pulled up, the street was already crawling with onlookers. People in robes and slippers stood on their porches, whispering to each other. A few had their phones out, recording us as we walked up the driveway. I hate when people do that, but I've learned to ignore it. The house was a single-story ranch, blinds drawn shut, no lights on inside. The neighbor pointed at the front steps, and sure enough, there was a faint trail of blood on the concrete. I announced myself, knocked, and got no response. My partner gave me a nod, and we forced entry. The smell hit us immediately. If you've never smelled blood in that quantity, it's hard to explain. Metallic, heavy, suffocating. The kind of smell that makes your stomach turn before your brain even catches up. The living room was a mess, furniture knocked over, a lamp shattered, photos off the wall. Blood smeared across the carpet, leading toward the kitchen. We followed the trail cautiously, weapons drawn, announcing ourselves at every step. When we entered the kitchen, we found her, a woman mid-30s, sprawled on the tile floor, multiple stab wounds to the chest and abdomen. There was no mistaking it. She was gone. Her eyes were open, staring blankly at the ceiling. Blood pooled thick around her. I radioed it in immediately. My Bodycam was rolling the entire time, recording everything from the forced entry to the discovery of the body. Per protocol, we cleared the rest of the house before anyone else entered. 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, nothing. Whoever did this was long gone. By the time detectives in the coroner arrived, we had secured the scene and taped off the house.
I gave my initial statement, then stepped outside to let the crime scene unit do their work. From that point, it should have been like any other case. Tragic, yes, but straightforward. But there was something off that I couldn't shake. While we were inside, I noticed my body cam had been glitching. Not badly, but just enough for me to notice. Occasional flickers in the feed, little skips like the video was dropping frames. Normally, I chalk it up to low battery or interference, but my camera had been fully charged at roll call, and I'd never seen it skip like that before. I didn't mention it right away, figured IT would fix it when I docked the camera back at the station. That night, after the paperwork and statements, I finally went off duty. The images from the kitchen stuck in my head. The woman's lifeless eyes, the sheer amount of blood. I went home, showered, and tried to sleep, but something about the footage kept nagging at me. The next afternoon, when I came back on shift, my sergeant called me into his office. He said they'd been reviewing the body cam files from the scene and needed me to sit in. Now, this isn't unusual. Body cam footage gets reviewed constantly, especially for homicides. But the way he said it, like he wasn't telling me everything, set me on edge. We went into the conference room, where a detective, an IT guy, and my sergeant were waiting. On the screen was my footage from the previous night. It started normal enough, me and my partner walking up the driveway, the neighbor in the background pointing to the door. The audio picked up my knock, my announcements, then us forcing the door and entering the house. But when we reached the kitchen, that's when it got strange. The video began to stutter. The audio lagged behind, words cutting in and out. My partner's voice stretched unnaturally, like a tape slowing down. The IT guy paused the footage, rewound, and played it again frame by frame. At first, it just looked like static distortion, grainy frames, black lines cutting across the screen. But then, in one of those skipped frames, something changed. The victim, the woman on the kitchen floor, moved. It was subtle, almost too quick to notice. Her fingers twitched, just for a split second. Then the glitch cut again, and she was motionless. The room went silent. Nobody said anything for a long time. Finally, the detective asked if I remembered seeing any movement at the scene. I told him no. I was absolutely certain the victim was deceased when we found her. The coroner had confirmed it. The IT guy rewound again, slowed the footage even more. This time, we saw more. In another glitched frame, the woman's head turned slightly to the side. Her mouth opened. Not wide, not fully, but enough that you could see the dark shape inside. Almost like she was trying to scream. And then it cut back to static. I felt my stomach drop. My sergeant leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. Nobody said anything. The detective finally spoke. It could just be corrupted data. Body cams glitch all the time. But his tone wasn't convincing. He'd seen what I'd seen. That wasn't just data corruption. That was movement. The IT guy tried to offer an explanation. Compression errors, dropped frames, digital artifacts. But the more he talked, the less sense it made. Artifacts don't make a body appear to move in realistic, fluid ways. The detective replayed the footage several times, each time pausing on those split-second frames. Each time, the woman appeared to shift slightly, her mouth opening wider, her limbs contorting just a little more. And then in one frame, we saw her eyes. They weren't lifeless and glazed like at the scene. They were open, focused, staring directly at the camera. I pushed back from the table. My chest felt tight, palms sweating. I wanted to say something, but my voice cut in my throat. The detective quickly moved the footage forward past the glitching, back to the normal feed where she was clearly dead. He told us to stop for the day. But as I left that room, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we'd seen on that footage wasn't just a malfunction. It was something else. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing her eyes in my head, open, locked onto the camera lens. There was no mistaking it. That wasn't some compression glitch. That was intent. The next shift, I walked into the station half expecting the whole thing to be brushed aside. Maybe they'd decided not to talk about it anymore, chalk it up to bad data. But when I got there, 2 detectives were waiting for me. They wanted me to sit through the footage again. This time, they had the audio slowed down too. We all sat in the darkened conference room, the big flat screen glowing. The IT guy queued it up to the kitchen sequence again. The static began, the video stuttered, and then there it was. In one frozen frame, her body lurched, spine arching in an unnatural angle, her jaw opened wide, wider than it should have been possible. And layered faintly beneath the audio distortion, we heard something. A sound buried under the static. It wasn't clear. It wasn't even fully human, but it was there. A muffled, choked scream. One of the detectives swore under his breath. The IT guy paused it, rewound, and played it again, and there it was. Clearer now, once you knew what to listen for. A voice in the distortion. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Every time her body glitched, it shifted more violently, her arms jerking, her legs contorting, her mouth opening wider until it looked like it would tear her face in half. Finally, in the last corrupted frame, her body was half sitting up, head tilted toward the camera, and her mouth moved. The audio crackled, and for a fraction of a second, you could hear one word. Help. The room went silent. Nobody breathed. I felt sick. My chest tightened. This woman had been declared dead on scene. The coroner had confirmed it, but the footage showed something else, something impossible. My sergeant shut off the monitor. He said that that's enough. He ordered the IT guy to archive the footage, restrict access, said it was sensitive evidence. But I could tell by his face he wanted it buried. I left the station shaken. On the drive home, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her in the back seat. Every shadow on the side of the road made me flinch. That night, I had the worst dreams of my life. I dreamed I was back in the kitchen, standing over her body, only this time she wasn't lying still. She was convulsing, twitching, her head snapping toward me in violent jerks. Blood poured from her mouth as she screamed without sound. And then she sat up and crawled toward me as her black eyes locked on mine. I woke drenched in sweat, my heart hammering. The next morning, I came in early, determined to see the footage again. But when I asked the IT guy, he looked nervous, said the files had been corrupted, completely unviewable now, gone. I pressed him, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just repeated that the footage was lost. Later that day, one of the detectives pulled me aside, quietly. He said he had copied the glitched segment onto a thumb drive before it was scrubbed. He told me not to tell anyone. Then he slipped it into my hand and walked away. I shouldn't have watched it. I know that now. But that night I plugged it into my laptop at home and hit play. The footage was worse outside the station. Maybe it was because I was alone, sitting in the dark, but the distortion seemed stronger, the movements more violent, her eyes more alive. At one point she snapped her head directly toward the lens and whispered under the static. This time, I heard it clearly. Not help. Behind you. The screen cut to black. I froze, my blood turning to ice. Slowly, I turned in my chair and scanned my apartment. Nothing. Just shadows. Just silence. But from that night on, I haven't felt alone. Even now, when I review Bodycam footage from other calls, sometimes the feed stutters, just for a second. And in those glitches, I swear I see her, standing in the background, watching. And when the static crackles in my earpiece, I hear faint whispers. Always the same voice, always the same word. Help.
Search and rescue calls are never easy, but when it's in the middle of a national forest at night, they're a whole different kind of unnerving. I've been a patrol officer long enough to deal with plenty of lost hikers, campers, even the occasional runaway teenager, but nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced that night. It was late fall, and the sun had set early. Temperatures were dropping fast, and a man had been reported missing by his family after he failed to return from a solo hike. He was in his early 30s, experienced outdoorsman according to the relatives, but even experienced hikers get turned around in that forest once night falls. By the time I arrived, there were already deputies, rangers, and volunteers combing the area. Everyone had flashlights, radios, and markers. The woods stretched out for miles, dense and silent, except for the crunch of leaves underfoot. The search was organized into grids. Teams of 2 swept different sectors, calling out the man's name every few minutes. My partner for the night was another deputy, but after about half an hour of searching, we split slightly to cover more ground, still within shouting distance, at least at first. "Roberts, you good?" my partner called from somewhere to my left. "All good," I answered back, scanning my flashlight through the thick trees. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No crickets, no owls, just the faint rustling of leaves in the wind, the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of your own breathing. I kept moving forward, calling the hiker's name. "Daniel, Sheriff's Office, call back if you can hear me." My voice echoed through the trees, bouncing back strangely. I listened, but nothing answered. I checked my radio. Static, then a faint burst of chatter. Signal was patchy out there, not unusual in the deep woods. I took a deep breath and pushed deeper. My Bodycam was on, as always, recording everything. After maybe 10 minutes of searching, I stopped to listen again. That's when I heard it. My own voice. "Daniel, Sheriff's Office, call back if you can hear me." The exact same words I'd shouted a few minutes earlier. Same tone, same inflection. But it wasn't echo. It came from farther ahead, deeper in the woods. I froze. The hair on my arms stood straight up. "Roberts, that you?" I called out, thinking maybe my partner was messing around. No answer. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and kept moving, cautiously now. After another 100 yards, I stopped again. "Daniel, can you hear me?" This time the reply came quicker. "Daniel, can you hear me?" My voice again. But wrong. Too smooth. Too drawn out, like someone was imitating me but didn't quite understand how words should sound. "Roberts," I called, louder now. Nothing. I raised my radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I think I'm picking up something strange out here. Any word from Roberts?" Only static answered. Predatory, like something was mocking me. I pushed forward anyway. Training takes over in those moments. You focus on the job. Find the hiker. Don't let fear cloud your judgment. But the deeper I went, the worse it got. Every time I called out, the mimicry came back. Perfect copies of my own voice, but always just slightly delayed. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther, sometimes from multiple directions at once. And then came the movement. Not loud, just flashes of pale shapes darting between the trees at the edge of my flashlight's reach. Every time I swung the beam toward them, they were gone, but my Bodycam caught them. I didn't realize it at the time, but later, reviewing the footage, you could see brief glimpses of something humanoid. Too pale, too fast, moving on all fours, then upright, then gone. At the time, all I felt was the forest pressing in around me, every instinct screaming to turn back. But I couldn't. Somewhere out there was a man who might still be alive. And something else was hunting in those woods. The voice kept calling. Not from one place, but everywhere, ahead of me, behind me, to the left, to the right. Each time, it used my own tone, my own inflections, like it was splicing recordings of me together. "This way! Come on, over here! I found something! Hurry!" Except each phrase carried that unnatural hum beneath it, like static vibrating through a radio speaker. I had my rifle raised, flashlight cutting across the trees, but no matter where I looked, there was nothing. Just empty forest, shadows, and the occasional flicker of pale skin darting between the pines, too fast for me to track. I keyed my radio again. "Base, this is Officer Nolan. I think someone's playing games out here. I'm hearing my own voice being mimicked. Can you track my location?" The reply was garbled, static, swallowing the dispatcher's words. The only part that came through was, "Repeat, signal weak. Stay put if you—" And then silence. I tried again, but the radio was dead air now, just a faint hiss. I turned in a slow circle, scanning. That's when I noticed the forest had gone completely silent. No crickets, no owls, not even the wind through the leaves. Just my own breathing, ragged and uneven, and the crunch of pine needles under my boots. The swings of light from my Bodycam and flashlight caught glimpses, always in the corner of my eye. Something pale, long-limbed, moving with jerks like frames missing from a film reel. At one point, I swear I saw it crouching low between two trees, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its face featureless except for two gaping hollows where the eyes should be. When I whipped the light back, it was gone. Then, the voice spoke again, closer this time. "Help me." But it wasn't mimicking me. It was the hiker's voice, a woman's, weak, desperate. "Hello?" I shouted, scanning with my light. "Where are you?" From deep in the trees. "Over here! Please, hurry!" Against every bit of training I had, I followed the sound. I told myself I couldn't just ignore it. If there was even a chance the hiker was alive, I had to try. But with each step, the forest felt wrong. Like the trees were crowding closer, leaning inward. The path under my boots twisted, roots jutting up like claws, forcing me to stumble and catch myself. The voice repeated again, always just out of reach. "This way. Hurry, it's cold." At one point, I saw movement ahead. Someone standing in the beam of my flashlight. A woman, hair rematted, clothes torn. The missing hiker. She looked right at me. I sprinted toward her, and she flickered, like bad video. One frame she was there, the next she was gone. In her place, something tall and skeletal crouched, pale skin stretched tight over bones, limbs far too long. Its mouth opened slowly, wider than any human's should. I froze. Then it whispered in my voice again. "Come closer." I stumbled back, rifle raised. My finger brushed the trigger, but before I could fire, the thing blurred into the trees, impossibly fast. I turned, flashlight jerking wildly, but I couldn't find it. Only more whispers, circling me now, echoing in dozens of voices, mine, the hiker's, even my dispatcher's radio tone. I don't remember running, but suddenly I was crashing through the underbrush, breath burning in my chest, branches whipping across my face. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed out. That's when my foot snagged on a root, and I went down hard. The rifle clattering into the dirt. My flashlight rolled, its beam landing on something just ahead. A shoe. I scrambled forward. The missing hiker lay there on the forest floor, motionless. Her skin was pale, lips blue, eyes open and glassy. She'd been dead for hours, maybe days. But from behind me, her voice called out again. "Please, help me." I spun, grabbing my rifle, but the forest was empty. Eventually, I stumbled back onto a trail. My radio crackled to life again, dispatch calling my name. Rescue teams found me not long after, and the hiker's body was retrieved. Official report said exposure, natural causes. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. When they reviewed my Bodycam footage, they saw everything. The mimicry, the flickering figure darting through the trees, the dead hiker's body lying in front of me while her voice whispered from the woods. And just before the footage ends, there's a single, clear frame. A pale face, featureless, pressed up close against the lens. I was given leave after that, and though they cleared me to return, I can't shake the feeling that it followed me back. Sometimes when I'm home alone, I'll hear my own voice calling from another room, and I never answer. I'd been on the force for a little over 11 years now. You'd think after enough welfare checks, noise complaints, and domestic calls, you'd be numb to the quiet ones. The ones where the dispatcher's voice is calm, almost casual, because nobody's screaming on the other end. But I'll tell you right now, it's the quiet calls that end up sticking with you. That night, dispatch flagged me for a welfare check at a small apartment complex on the east side of town. Neighbors reported they hadn't seen Mrs. Green, an elderly woman in her late 70s, for nearly a week. The lights hadn't turned on, her mail was piling up, and the woman who lived across the hall said she usually saw her every morning on the way to work. When I pulled up, it was already late, close to 10 p.m. The halls of the complex were dim, only one fluorescent bulb flickering in the ceiling. The smell of stale carpet and mildew filled the air. I knocked on her door 3 times, announcing myself as police. No response. Per policy, I called in maintenance to open the door. An older guy with a cigarette dangling from his lips muttered something about the old lady always feeding stray cats, then jiggled his keys and let me inside. The apartment was cluttered, but not messy. Piles of old newspapers stacked against the wall, porcelain figurines lined neatly on a dusty shelf, half-filled teacups fossilized on the coffee table. It felt frozen in time. "Mrs. Green?" I called out, moving cautiously from room to room. No response. The bedroom door was cracked open. The air inside was heavy and warm, smelling faintly of lavender and something sour beneath it. I flicked on the light. She was there, lying on her side in bed, peaceful, hands folded. No signs of a struggle. I did the usual checks, though I already knew. Skin cold to the touch, no pulse, rigor mortis already setting in. She had been gone a few days at least. I called it in. Dispatch would send the coroner. I stayed to secure the scene, jotting down notes, keeping my body cam rolling like always. Honestly, I thought it was going to be one of those sad but uneventful cases, just an old woman who passed alone. But when I reviewed the footage later, I realized I hadn't been alone at all. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The camera showed me walking through the cluttered living room, scanning with my flashlight. But then, as I panned past the kitchen doorway, there was movement. A pale, elongated hand curled around the doorframe for just a second, before vanishing. I swear I hadn't seen it with my own eyes that night. The footage continued. As I entered the bedroom, something could be seen just over my shoulder in the darkened hallway. A gaunt figure, leaning slightly, its head tilted unnaturally, watching me from the corner. Skin stretched thin, eyes dark and hollow. When I turned, the hallway was empty.
At one point, as I bent over Mrs. Green to check her vitals, the body cam picked up a reflection in the dresser mirror behind me. A figure, impossibly tall, crouched down as if kind of stay out of sight, its limbs grotesquely long. By the time I straightened up, it was gone. I didn't notice any of this at the time. To me, the apartment had been empty, silent except for the hum of the fridge, but the footage told another story, like something was living there, moving, just outside my line of vision. The worst moment was when I called in the time of death. As I spoke into my radio, the camera captured the bedroom door slowly swinging shut behind me. A skeletal face peeked from the gap for only a frame or two, lips pulled back into what might have been a grin. Then darkness. Mrs. Green wasn't living alone. She hadn't been for a long time. I didn't sleep for days after reviewing that tape. None of us could explain it. Some of the guys at the station joked about squatters or digital glitches, but I knew. I felt it when I thought back on that room, the heavy air, the sense of being watched, even though I never saw a thing. The coroner ruled it natural causes. That's what went on the record. But off the record, we all whispered about what the footage showed. Sometimes I wonder if that thing had been living with her for years, just out of sight, if it had watched her eat, sleep, age, if she even knew. And I wonder, when I walked out of that apartment that night, if it followed me down the hall. Because some nights, when I'm back on patrol and things are quiet, I'll catch glimpses in the corners of my own vision, a shape ducking just out of sight, a reflection in glass that doesn't match my movements. I try not to think about it, but sometimes I do. And I realize maybe Mrs. Green wasn't the only one with an unseen tenant.